Yeah, so we've gathered today. I think some of you may have been on with Vanessa. So of course, Vanessa is my equivalent, the Family and Community Wellness Agent over in Morton County, because I think this was a joint county effort since Kelsey supports both counties. So again, I'm Chandra Zeman-Belinsky, and I am in the Burley office. And we're just on the east edge of town here in the 4-H building. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about preserving herbs. My background is food science, and so preservation is a passion of mine, especially, preserving our own beautiful, bountiful, the stuff that we grow throughout the season. And it's been a couple of years that I've paused gardening. I'm actually going to stop share so I can see your faces quickly here. So please give me a thumbs up if you plan to have your own garden this year. Even if it's a community garden, just do your own garden. And you can do a thumbs up in person, or you can find your reactions and do a thumbs up like this. Yeah. Okay. I see Alice on. I'm going to pick on you. Alice, are you gardening this year? I think she's having trouble with her sound. Otherwise, she would answer. Oh, she's on twice, Kelsey. I don't know if you can work with her in the background. Hopefully she's okay. So good. I saw a lot of thumbs, and I'm going to get here to the presentation again, and we'll get rolling. So I did look up the herbs that you were offered in your packets with the wellness kits, that window box wellness kits that Kelsey put together. And out of those, we had a lot of information on these three specifically. So we'll focus on these for the sake of the presentation, but if you have something else you'd like to preserve, by all means, contact me. And, again, here's my contact. So the phone number or the email, and I'll get either one of those. But we'll talk about basil, we'll talk about dill, and of course, mint today, because we just have so much information on these three. So let's first go into basil. And if you have any questions, feel free to unmute at any time. This is a friendly forum. You can also enter in the chat, and Kelsey will likely see that for me. It's a little harder when you're presenting. So at any time. So let's get into basil. All about basil. So here's a few varieties of basil, and I'm thinking that if you'd like to go and chat and share other varieties. I know I usually grow lemon basil. I happen to love lemon basil. I like just the regular, Italian basil. If you'd like to share another variety, I'd love to hear about it. But actually, basil is called the royal herb by the Greeks because it's rich in aroma, very high in aromatics. It's an herb that actually is used across many different cultures, and it not only packs a pretty significant flavor and a friendly flavor, not too bitter. Basil is usually associated in food science with sweet undertones, as opposed to oregano with a little bit of bitter undertones. So I think that probably contributes. That's me adding to this now, but why it's so widely accepted across multiple cultures. So and as we go through the different herbs here, these are the ideal methods of preserving after you have a nice harvest. And so for basil, it's freezing and drying. And across the others, you'll see multiple, but basil can be a little bit more delicate. So let's get into how to preserve with these two different techniques. And there's a big asterisk here. Some gardeners have, and Kelsey can chime in here because she's the horticulture person. I happen to be a gardener myself, so I know a little bit, but she's the expert. I was going to say some people, when it comes to herbs, because they are a little more delicate than like a vegetable or even a fruit, some say to not rinse them. And that's the opposite, because there can be contaminants on there, even just from the soil naturally. Let me mute my phone, sorry. So there can be contaminants, including little critters, that can spoil them. So definitely wash your herbs before you preserve them. So let's get into freezing first. So a couple of different methods. I like the first one. We'll actually elaborate a little bit more in the next coming slides here, but removing the stems. And because again, they contribute a little bit of bitterness, and when you're ready to preserve, it's best to, the leaves are sort of the part that we want from the plant. And so when you remove them from the stem, it's ideal to sort of stop that maturing process. And we'll talk about that when we talk about blanching on the next slide here. So I'll elaborate in a minute. But blanch leaves, and this is important, the time frame of how long to blanch is 3 seconds. So very quick. It's a quick, sort of have your water boiling and have your scoop ready, have everything going, because you don't want to go too long. Dry with a paper towel. So this is something you can have set up. Separate the leaves before you place them in the storage bag. You may have some questions here, so please raise your hand. Kelsey will alert me here. And the second method, I happen to think this is pretty creative, but pureeing or placing in, I'm going to say or even, placing them in ice cube trays. Then cover the tray and freeze. And that's because even in the freezer, and if you leave your ice cubes too long, you can see this just in your freezer without even, having an herb in the ice cube, but it does evaporate. So if you cover the tray, there'll be nice, smooth ice cubes on top. And you could even use a whole piece of basil. And I actually think about doing that. Maybe one application could be with a fun drink, like even a water, if you like the taste of basil. Let's get into blanching a little bit. Kind of a boring, lots of words slide, but it's a process that's important to know. So when it comes to blanching, remember we always say when you are preserving food to preserve your best. So if you have some leaves that have some spots here and there, I would say use those now. And it's okay to use, we have a saying, ugly food, it doesn't have to look perfect, but use that right away, and then preserve the nicest looking leaves, the most intact or the least damaged, whether it be, a nick here and there, or maybe there was a little nibble from a critter. So tear that off, use that first, preserve your best. So, and this is why I say that. The condition of the herb at the time of freezing is the absolute number one, close to number two factor that affects the quality when you go to use it after pulling it out of the freezer. The number two, the close number two, is the fact that we do have to blanch it, as was indicated on the last slide. And the reason for blanching is that our plants have enzymes within them. And enzymes, some of you might have a chemistry background, I bet you do. Enzymes, just to reiterate, actually are sort of a catalyst, and they activate the ripening of the food and the maturation as it grows. It actually helps with growth. So without those enzymes, we wouldn't get the ideal product. But at the end, we want to sort of stop that process or just retard it. And it's ideal, the word is to inactivate the enzyme. The reason is to prevent off flavors when we go to consume them. If you've ever frozen green beans and not blanched them, that's the one that I think of when I was younger. So you have these nice, beautiful, crisp, bright green beans. You pull them out and they're dark and they're limp and they're no longer crisp. That's where blanching is key. So the off flavors, the discoloration, toughness, and can it be the opposite of that even, where it's overly limp, and it renders them unappetizing. Not necessarily a food safety issue, but not appetizing. So we want to make sure that we have the best flavor. So freezing, I just want to mention that, it does control the action and it slows the action of maturing and ripening, but it doesn't stop it. And it's the same with heating and chemical compounds too, but we're focusing on freezing. So there's a little bit of a difference that's mentioned here in vegetables as opposed to fruits. So enzymes in vegetables and herbs also are inactivated by heat during this blanching process. And so that's why it's that important. Enzymes in fruits are a little bit different. It actually can cause browning. So an enzymatic browning would be the equivalent of when you cut an apple and it starts browning nearly immediately, because for enzymatic browning, we need oxygen too. But just an example of where you would see in fruit that browning. And of course, then you lose vitamin C. Actually, you get the enzymatic browning not only because of the exposure to oxygen, but as you cut through or break, especially when you cut through, that reaction with the metal, in addition to actually just breaking that cell structure of every little cell that makes up an apple. So as soon as you break that cell structure, it's actually the fruit's defense mechanism. That enzyme is released and it wants it to look unappetizing. So the enzymes of fruits are controlled also by antioxidants. And so that's why, in addition to, I would call it a chemical, a natural chemical, just even a type of acid, vitamin C. So, when I was a kid, my mom would slice apples and then she would put them in orange juice as a snack for school. So they were sliced, you could drink the orange juice, then eat your apples. So just kind of a neat application I thought I'd share. But so the reason why we want to control enzymes, it's really for quality at the end when you go to actually take it out, because you've taken so much time in growing. You want it to be the best. So times that are recommended for various herbs or vegetables are really relative to that item. So remember, for basil, it's 3 seconds, 3 seconds. Just to mention here, under blanching, likely it wouldn't be the case with basil, but maybe, other vegetables, if you're in the market there. Under blanching can actually stimulate the activity of the enzyme and is actually worse than not blanching at all. But over blanching, of course, again, not appealing. Loss of vitamins and minerals, flavor and color. So I suppose this came to mind when we were talking, are you blanching correctly? So here's how to blanch, and there is a full publication on this. And I am not able to copy that right now, but I'll put it in at the end of the presentation. So blanching in boiling water, there's a couple different ways. I also put in steam, which should be not bulleted, so sorry about that. So boiling, let's go through that one first. So use a blancher that has a basket. It's ideal because you can remove the food the second you want to. And really it comes down to seconds when you're blanching, especially herbs. And you want one that has a cover because you can keep the boil up. When it comes to blanching, the boil is extremely important. And if you're somebody who cans, same thing. So if you think boiling water to food preservation, doesn't matter what method, you're on a positive streak. And so let's just get into why that is. In addition to, in just a second, in addition to a wire basket, cheesecloth is an option. Cheesecloth isn't as openly porous as maybe a wire basket or a type of colander, so it doesn't cool off as quickly. Just thought I'd mention that, but it is definitely an option. So I would say, now here's the method for vegetables. For herbs, I would just say use 1 gallon of water, but you could use less. So use at least 1 gallon of water for each pound of vegetables. Just a side note here, as it pertains to preserving vegetables, usually this is where folks go wrong because they put too much product, vegetable product, into the water and it stops boiling. And that's when you get sort of an under blanch but yet over blanch problem, and you really have all the problems. So put the vegetables in the basket or bag and lower the basket into the boiling water. This basket helps you control the time. And it could even be a scooper or something like that. Cover and start counting time immediately. So add your product, cover. Keep heat in, that's why we cover, and continue boiling for the time specified, for the herb or vegetable that you're freezing. If the boil stops, I almost should bold this too. You are blanching too large a quantity at one time for the amount of water. So back to that 1 gallon to pound of vegetables, but you know, your herbs aren't going to add up to that much. So you should be okay to just do 1 gallon or maybe even less. So the same water can be reused several times for blanching. Just be sure to bring it back to a vigorous boil before adding vegetables. It's all about the boil. To blanch and steam, which is, I would say, recommended for herbs. That's my addition here, just from my experience. Put 1 to 2 inches of water in a kettle and bring to a rolling boil. So just note that your actual herbs are not immersed in the water. It's the steam environment, as they would, you know, immersed in the water as they would be for boiling water. Suspend a thin layer of vegetables in a wire basket or cheesecloth over the rapidly boiling water, and as it says, cover to keep the heat in, steam at the recommended time. And actually, it's the same amount of time in the case of herbs, as in the case of basil. So let's see, yeah, we get into drying. So I'm actually gonna stop share here quickly and see if you have any questions, because I wanna get this presentation reference to you in the chat. So feel free to unmute if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to just screen share and get back to it. So there's the chat there. If you'd like a full presentation on, or the full publication on freezing its vegetables, but we really elaborate on blanching in that reference. So that's why I wanted to do that. Okay, so here we go. All right, are you seeing the screen again, Kelsey? Yeah, good. Okay.
No, we don't have your presentation up.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, very good. I know sometimes it's hard when you go back and forth, but I did want you to see that reference. Okay. Boy, I think I'm not going to do that again, friends. So
as you're working on that, Alice said she likes the steam blanch and information.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Alice. Awesome. So glad to see Alice on here. Okay, let's do a show taskbar. Let's do a screen share. Perfect. Here we go, finally. Okay, rolling. Okay, Kelsey, good?
Yep, we're good.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So let's get into drying. So drying basil specifically. Well, I mean, right off the bat, it says not the best option. And this actually was something that was added to a research, or by a research student by the person who actually originally started this presentation. I definitely added to it. So anyways, a student put this in. You know, I almost have to disagree with that. I love dried basil. Certainly it doesn't pack the same flavor punch. I think that's what they're referencing, but there is definitely a time and place for dried basil. Especially if some of your family, if you love basil, but somebody else doesn't love it, you can kind of sneak it in there a little bit and get some of the health benefits, because you'll see on the next slide, this is one of the few herbs that actually has health benefits. So separate each leaf as you're before you dry and remove stems. Removing stems is also always important. And you can use a food dehydrator to dry the leaves. Every single food is different with a dehydrator. Every single dehydrator is different. So just follow the manufacturer's instructions. If there is one manual of, you know, an appliance that you really want to keep, I would say it's definitely your food dehydrator. So store your dehydrator with your user manual, because that's really where, when people call me, I have to pull up their dehydrator manual to help them know how long to dehydrate something. And you know when they're done, when they're just completely dry and crumbly, just like the picture shows. After they've cooled is the time to then store them. If you don't wait till they're cool, I'm sure you can guess what happens. You know, heat, byproduct of going from warm to cool is moisture. So you're just adding moisture back in if you put it in an airtight container before it's cooled. You know, this is something we always say, just like preserve your best. We really recommend preserving what you can use within a year. And that's because quality diminishes pretty significantly after 18 months, but quite significantly after about 12 months. Okay, so let's skip to the next slide if there's no questions. Yeah, here's just that nutrition piece that I mentioned. Although most herbs don't have a lot of significant nutritional benefits, basil does. Basil has actually a little bit of calorie, energy contribution, and definitely some nutrients, which is quite neat that they have pretty high vitamin A. And it really is a flavor reducer, which actually helps reduce the amount of salt that you would choose to add to your dishes then, because it packs a flavor punch. And, you know, as we age, we know through research that our senses do become a little bit more compromised. They're less heightened. So you have a tendency to add more sugar, add more salt. Here's an option to add something instead to heighten the flavor of your food. All right, I guess I probably started with basil and I didn't mean to go alphabetical order. Basil is my favorite herb. So let's get into dill, because dill is a fantastic resilient herb. And it's actually the most commonly grown herb. But the reason why I say it's fantastic is because you can save and preserve really all parts of the plant, which is quite amazing. You can save the seeds, the flower head, which is called umbel, and the leaves, which is also called either a bouquet or a ducat, kind of like C-O-T, ducat pronunciation. And so that's the bouquet. So if you're saving the flower, it looks like this. I'm sorry. Yeah, the flower head. Here we go. And the ducat, it is maybe the opposite of what you think. The ducat or the bouquet is, you know, before it actually flowers out. And I should find a picture of that. That's one thing I didn't add. Sorry about that. So, okay, the flower head or the umbel is sort of the bouquet of it. So preserving dill. And I shouldn't confuse you. I do want to mention something. When I was looking this up to make sure that I was saying the right thing, because it was the opposite of what I thought, ducat is actually a type of dill, I want to mention. And so ducat is these, I would call them sort of cruciferous. They come across the stem like a cross. The sort of, I'm going to call them little tiny baby leaves, are actually in the ducat form of dill a little bit on the blue side. So maybe you've seen this, like a bluish green, and they're actually the sweetest and most flavorful dill. They have, through research, the longest lasting flavor. So it's not only a reference in the type of bouquet, but it's a reference in a type of dill. Okay, so that was a side note too. But going back to preserving options, here we have 5 instead of just 2 like dill. So air drying. And I would also argue that oven drying is a type of air drying, so that's okay. Microwave drying, freezing, and pickling. I'm sure lots of you have had dill pickles or made, or, you know, canned dill pickles on your own. So definitely pickling is associated with dill. So when we say pickling, that's defined as water bath canning with added acid. Okay. So here we go again. Please rinse your herbs before you go to save them. That was just a misconception a few years ago. So air drying. So cut the dill. So this is just not actually using a forced food dehydrator or an oven. Okay. So just letting it air dry naturally. So cut dill when it's about 6 inches tall. And that's the key here. 6 inches tall, not too big. Tie the stems, creating a small bundle. I love this picture, and I feel like what a wonderful gift. And this is something I know you guys are saying picking radishes early. This could come pretty early where you could, give an early gift of something that can flavor a soup and, any of your foods. I actually have a recipe for our good old traditional Nefla soup. And I know we all have our Nefla soup how we like it, but I have a recipe that includes dill in the Nefla. It's an NDSU extension recipe. And it's a wonderful flavor. So place the bundle in a small paper bag, and this is the important piece here because it helps protect it because you've washed it already. And so it keeps irritants out. And then you would place this bag in a cool, dark room for about 2 weeks. So when dried, it'll fall apart easily. So this is something where I'm suggesting to give sort of a beautiful bundle like this and maybe just these instructions as a gift. And then after you would, just like the basil, sort of crush it into small pieces where you can pepper it on your food. That's where you would actually do this with dill, but it falls apart on its own. And then you would store those small little pieces of your dried dill in your airtight container. I know I was at Dan's the other day and I told my little boy he could pick out anything he wanted. And of all things, he picked out an empty herb storage container. And it was one that was just like you would have for a spice or an herb and, that you would buy commercially dried. So it was just empty and it had a nice little spot, a black spot where you could write what was in there with a piece of chalk. And, I just think about that container would be nice for this dill, and they have them at Dan's supermarket or probably anywhere, any Walmart or one of the hardware stores like Ace. Okay, so preservation with oven drying as opposed to allowing it to occur naturally. You would prepare a baking sheet covered with parchment paper so that it doesn't sort of stick onto the bottom. Parchment paper is a way that we prevent sticking without added fat or grease or even Pam, because that would take away from, in this case, the herb's natural aromatics and flavor. Okay, so preheat oven to 100 degrees. Now I actually am curious. I can only see a few of you. Let's see, I'll change my view. But I mean, my oven does not go down to 100 degrees. I'm curious if any of yours do. Do you have, take a look at some point. The last time I saw an oven that went down to 100 degrees, Clayton, does yours go to, oh, what a wonder, what do you have? Can you unmute and tell us?
I have a French dish. It's relatively new, but yeah, you put in the temperature you want it to go at. So when you turn it on initially, the oven comes on at 100 degrees. So that's the lowest setting I can go.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I love that. And I think it was a Frigidaire that I saw that went down to 100 degrees. So my oven at home goes down to 140 degrees. My oven at the lake only goes down to 170 degrees. And they're both Maytag. It doesn't matter the brand, but it's just a good piece of conversation here. And so I did look up for you because both mint and here dill, we'll get to mint in a second, reference 100 degrees. So if you don't go down that low, some ovens have a warm setting. I'm delighted to hear, Clayton, that you can enter your own temperature, which is fantastic. But here's the key. The research that I'm finding that if go down to your lowest setting, if you have a warm setting, I would suggest it. Don't go over 200 degrees. That's where we start affecting and start sort of burning the herb. So if you did want to speed up the process, for the first couple minutes, you can actually be at a higher temperature, like 160, 180, and then take it down to the lowest setting so that it dries slowly. But that's only if you're in a hurry, because the more that you speed up this process, the more that the cellular structure is affected. And that's a little less quality. So do place your herbs as you're doing this, though, in the oven on the pan and bake until the plant is just brittle and crumbly. And, separate them. That's not on here, but, often check them to prevent burning. And burning is just characterized by darkening. too dark. So if they're black. So maybe this is an opportunity as the world starts opening back up a little bit, whether you're comfortable or not, you know, maybe you go to a neighbor like Clayton's house who has a nice oven for this, just to get together opportunity. Thanks for sharing, you guys. Okay, so microwave drying, this is interesting. You know, actually, I want to mention that the whole futzing with getting out of the presentation and sharing that link with you on how to blanch vegetables and the elaboration of blanching in that publication, there is actually a way to blanch in the microwave, but it's not the most recommended method, again, because you can't control the boil as readily. So interesting that drying also has a microwave application. Place dill in between paper towels in this case. Microwave on high for 1 to 3 minutes. Check every 30 seconds to prevent burning, or those like burning hot spots that we get in a microwave. Now remember, my background's food science, and I have quite a bit of experience with working with microwaves and the technology that they present. And when we say microwave on high for 1 to 3 minutes, that's because the wattage of microwaves varies significantly. So if you're down to like a 600, you might be at 600 watts, you might be at 3 minutes. If you're up to 1,000, you might be even less than a minute. So that's why we say check every 30 seconds to prevent burning. So that first batch, you might want to try just a smaller amount before you know. But the thing to bear in mind is once you have a process with a certain amount of the herb, you don't really want to add to that, because then you will have to add the time in which you dry it. So sort of practice and then go with that amount that, you know, consistently. So don't put a large amount in the paper towels the next time you do it if you've only practiced with a small amount. So stay consistent with the amount that you're working with, and then you'll learn your time to your microwave. If you're somebody who likes to can, you know, water bath can, or even especially pressure canning, you get to know your canner with your oven. So if you choose microwaving, it's a great method, but you get to know that process relative to what you're working with for appliances. So definitely allow time to cool, again, because if you're drying and you put it away warm, you have moisture to contend with again. And, you know, check that ideally in this case, brittleness is where you want, you want it to break up and to be able to allow it for an application of sprinkling on your food, not chunks. So continue in those 30-second increments until it is brittle. Moving into freezing here, couple methods. You can place it in a airtight freezer bag, and we're still talking about dill here, and then place in the freezer, or you can chop it up and again place it in an ice cube tray, or you can even just chop it without putting it in an ice cube tray. Cover with water and freeze. And I do think of some, you know, some of these minty and cucumbery, basil, dill drinks. There's some fun recipes out there. So once frozen, place these cubes in a freezer bag for use in soups and stews. And actually, this is one where, you know, maybe you're not in the realm of making mac and cheese, but maybe you have grandkids or something like mac and cheese. My trick is to make mac and cheese, and I put 1 ice cube in it to cool it down for the size of bowl I serve it in. And that 1 ice cube renders it the perfect temperature for a little one's mouth. And so my kids happen to like dill. I think this would be a good idea to use some dill ice cube trays and sort of spice up a mac and cheese. Interject some fun ideas for you. Let's get into mint. Pause for a second here. Good time to take a deep breath, roll your shoulders back if you're not engaging in the best posture here. And we'll end with talking about mint. A short time for discussion at the end. Okay, so all about mint. Mint is refreshing, and that is a great word for it. When we give taste tests and different panels with consumer learning tests and understanding how people taste certain things, we reference mint as, and you know, any type of mint as being astringent on the tongue. It's not spicy, but if you go to chew mint, you know what I'm saying, where you actually have sort of this lingering effect. It's called a feeling factor on your tongue. And so some reference that as being refreshing. Mint has a high level of astringency, we call it, and again in food science. So with that sensory piece, mint is such a great thing to study. It's commonly used in foods and beverages, and there are, just like basil, multiple varieties, even dill. Chocolate mint, I know that our friends over at United Tribes, they have a pretty nice garden there, greenhouse, and they grow a lot of chocolate mint. And it really, I don't taste the chocolate, I have to say, but I definitely smell it. And so there's that aromatic piece.
It's great on desserts.
Yeah. Oh, that's
I
a
was
good
gonna
idea.
say if you do like brownies or something, or I guess I've had like that on brownies and then like a raspberry on top of the mint leaf. Really good.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, and has anybody had pineapple or apple mint? I have seen pineapple mint, but I've never dabbled with it. Yeah, that might be.
I've tried that one time too, Chandra, with a junior master gardener group. We had the pineapple mint. So we would, I mean, for the kids and stuff, we tried it fresh, and I don't know. I can taste, like, I know you said like the chocolate, the aroma and stuff. You definitely have that smell, but I also get that hint of that flavor.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, funny you say that, because we all have a different experience based upon our genetic makeup of how we perceive foods. That's why I always encourage, if you do have little ones at your home, and I speak about little ones because that's kind of my life right now, probably Kelsey's too, but I know Alice, she's busy with her grandkids. You know, it's important to just offer these different varieties, whether it's herbs or food, because we all have a different chemistry. And it's actually on our 6th chromosome predisposed how much we perceive bitter, for example. So that's why a lot of times people that are high bitter receptors don't like certain herbs, don't like coffee. So kind of a fun interjection. But I'm glad you said that, Kelsey. So I'm going to look for that pineapple. Imagine a summer drink with pineapple mint, right? Able to be grown fairly easy from home. And that's true. As I think about our friends at the United Tribes, it's like a weed over there, but a good weed. You know, it grows heartily and well in abundance. So the top 3 for preserving mint methods, we have the air drying naturally, oven drying, which is also air drying, like I said, but sort of speeding up the process. In this case, there's a dehydrator method, and freezing. Make sure you wash your herbs before you preserve them. So tying the stems together to create a bundle for air drying, again, with some of that nice string or whatever have you. I would stay away from a rubber band because it constricts, but you know, some type of tie. Place in a clean brown paper bag to protect it. And a paper bag versus a plastic bag, I can imagine, that there's an allowance for the transfer of moisture. And in this case, it's another 2 weeks in a dark, cool room. Mint should fall apart easily. That's how you know it's dry. And once dry, this is where you remove the leaves from stem and crush and place in a container, and then store in a dark, cool location, because you can, herbs do, any of your spices should be stored in a cool place because the sun does affect them. Okay, so oven drying. Let's get that parchment paper back out, and here we are with 100 degrees again, so a lower temperature. If you're not able to go lower, stick within that 200 degree parameter and watch it more often. And then, brittle is your friend here, and then we want to stay away from any blackening. So here's the note: if using a dehydrator, just follow the instruction manual. And then getting into freezing. the first method is to rinse, drain, and pat dry. I just use a paper towel, remove the leaves from the stem, spread on a sheet pan and freeze. This is called individually quick freeze within 30 minutes, so IQF in the food science world. So you might see that terminology when you're looking at recipes. So an individually quick freeze, that means that they're definitely separate. Like think of blueberries. When you freeze blueberries, it's if you leave them in, you know, all together in a container, they'll come out all together, even if you just want to, you know, maybe a half cup or something. So that's why oftentimes we recommend to individually quick freeze blueberries, for example, because you can take out the amount that you want. It's the same thing with mint here. So separate them on the pan. Place in freezer bags. So what we mean by that is if they are, you know, Ziploc is a brand, but maybe a sealing bag that they are labeled for safe for freezer. And they're a little bit more heavy duty. They control more readily the migration of water and from the food itself. So if you've ever opened just to explain what I mean, if you've ever opened a container of frozen peas, you know, just a bag that you've purchased, and there's a bunch of ice in there, that's called icing out. There is, even though you think that you're putting something in the freezer, it happens in ice cream too. If you haven't eaten it in a while, there's a layer of sort of ice crystals on top. The water migrates as it freezes. And so the individual quick freeze and the freezer bags help control that process. Method 2 is, hey, we've got the ice cube tray option again. And cover your cubes, and then in this case they say place in freezer bags. And you know, the first one didn't say that when we were talking about basil, but you certainly could just pop your ice cubes into a bag and go. But it does say chop the mint. There's a couple, I live in Bismarck here, if those of you who are out of town, there's a couple salons that I go to, and they give you ice cubes with just little pieces of lemon in there, so they don't have to worry about chopping the lemon fresh every day. And there's sometimes a whole strawberry, sometimes there's a whole piece of mint. So I would say you don't have to chop the mint if you don't want to, but it's a fun option when you're entertaining. And that takes us to questions, but before we get into, I'm going to stop sharing. Before we get into just a nice discussion, and I do encourage sharing here, I just want to mention, I think that at the end here, okay, yep, I've got a few screens going on, so forgive me from looking away. I'd like to show you the website where you can go for more information. We can always email you, or if you're not an email person, send you these publications to Kelsey. Either one of us would be happy to do that. So let's do a share screen and look at this website briefly. This is our NDSU Extension website. I'm actually really proud of our team in Fargo, mostly in Fargo. Some of our specialists are around the state, like Tom is here, but they put together these nice websites and references. Kelsey, are you seeing this website? Yeah, Clayton says yes. So here we go with basil. I didn't bring cilantro in today because I don't think anybody received it from this program, but feel free to go out. Here's dill, here's mint rosemary. Let's bring up cilantro briefly. Now, if you select it, here's where you can bring up the publication, download PDF, and it wants me to open it. And then I'm going to drag it over. Can you see the publication, Clayton? I can see your head. Yes. Okay, so usually they're a 2-pager. And if you're a grower, just like you guys are growing it in your garden boxes now, these publications include not only how to preserve it, but you know, how to grow it, how to store it. Well, storing is preservation, but also how to cook it. So there's some really nice publications, and I think there's one comment here. Yeah, no problem. So, okay, stop share here. Anything that you were hoping to get out of it today that I didn't cover, or maybe you have a good practice you do at home that we can talk about?
Maybe we should ask how many people use herbs in their daily diets.
Right.
Just if you guys want to put the thumbs up or thumbs down on the reaction.
No. Okay.
Doesn't look like many.
You know, okay, I have to say, I grew up in a very Russian German household, or, you know, even my mother-in-law, very Norwegian, that side. A lot of us didn't grow up with a bunch of this, adding these flavors, and they can seem sort of unwelcome and different. And I would say dabble with it. Start by drying it. If you want a stronger flavor, go to freezing, because they add a beautiful color, and you start actually, so that's why I say my childhood, I wasn't interested in any of this. And now I prefer it. So it's just sort of fun to, you know, introduce the others to in your family, and whether you're, you know, they're young and developing habits and things, it's good exposure to new. So it's okay. Maybe you will get something out of it. Now, I am curious. The question I wanted to ask though, Kelsey, is, are you successful with your herbs from this program? Is anybody seeing good herb growth right now in your box?
That'd be just Carlene and Alice on here.
I have chives that are growing good, but I received basil and summer savory. And I don't know if I could have overwatered them, but they came up, but it's just like they drooped over.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Kelsey, you're kind of the...
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, just with the drooping and stuff, like I said, usually when with herbs, the biggest thing, would be the overwatering and not allowing the soil to dry. When we start seeing that limpness, I would wonder too, Carlene, if your soil's been too wet.
I know it said to keep the soil moist, and so I tried to do that, but maybe just too much.
Yeah,
that
would be my guess.
Yeah, I like, Carlene, it's nice to see you on here today. I really like growing herbs, but they are really finicky, I have to say, and that's a but. It feels so good when you start mastering the process. And I'm not quite there yet, but I can tell you, once I got the spray bottle out with a fine mist, that was the way to go for me. And I'm sure that's probably a tip somewhere in our Master Gardener stuff, Kelsey. I'm thinking I picked it up from there. I'm also in the Army, and my commander has a vineyard. She has a winery over in Alexandria, Minnesota. When we were mobilized in 2018 to 19, we shared an apartment for a short bit, and she has quite the green thumb. And she also had that water bottle out, is why I thought of it. So try again, because they don't take long. They don't have a long growth, you know, what's that called?
I'll try again.
What's it called when it goes from planting to pick? You know, like celery is 120 days. But
the growing days, the amount of growing days. Yep.
It's pretty quick for herbs.
It is, yep. Depending on the herb, but
yeah. Yeah, you know, one of those, cilantro, I love cilantro. Cilantro's very polarizing, again, because of sensory science. Some people like it, some people don't. Some people are pre-genetically disposed to, it tastes like soap to them. I love it though, and that's one, it goes to seed so quickly, Kelsey. I don't know, you just have to keep picking.
I was gonna say, when you said taste-wise on cilantro, my mom always says it tastes like metal to her.
Oh,
she doesn't like it. Again, it's kind of weird when people reference that. It's like, you haven't ate metal, so you know, like, okay.
That's great.
I've never heard of the summer savory herb before. What do you use that for?
Yeah, you know, I started looking into it, and I didn't quite, we had a death in the family. I think I would have probably included that in this presentation, Carlene, so sorry I didn't have it, but I just want to say that I would actually love to, you're good with email. I'm going to pull some things. I found some from University of Minnesota, University of Missouri extension programs, and that's as far as I got. So I'm going to let you guys chit chat, and I'm going to Google it quick because I know I found some things. So I'm going to mute here. see if
Yeah, and I
I,
was gonna say, Chandra, from what I've understand and stuff, is it can be both in like a hot, like a traditional dish, or like even holiday cooking. Can be used as like part of a marinade. And even like if you would do like a olive or like an oil dressing. I think people have utilized it in vinegar as well. I think those were a couple examples of what I've seen out there. Carlene on it as well. So
okay,
from what I understand, it's like a spicier one. I haven't ever tasted that one either, so it's kind of considered like a spicy or whatever and stuff. But so it's supposed to be very flavorful.
Okay.
But yeah, like a lot of just different dishes. Again, like if you're using it with like vinegars, stuffings,
oh, bean dishes, okay. Are you seeing the
sauces,
screen here?
rice.
Do you see the screen, Kelsey?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, sausage for sure. Carlene, do you have any growing now, you say?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't have any summer savory growing.
But I love this because it's one of those that does well. It makes sense that they sent it, Kelsey. It says here, this is Illinois Extension. Summer savory is easily grown indoors in containers in the winter.
Yeah, right
Sunny-
there you have meat, soup, vegetable dishes, and salads. It says used. So, like I said, I've never tasted it myself, so I don't know. But I know, kind of looking at some of those again that were in there that aren't very traditional herbs and stuff. Kind of supposed to be like utilize like a spice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you.
You know, that looks like it has such a beautiful bunch, you know, like when you gather it with the twine.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I just stopped sharing. I'll do it one more time. I'm obsessed with sharing today, apparently. So, but look how pretty this just for decor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really wish you growers a great season. We anticipate in extension a pretty popular growing season. You know, people want to get out right now. And then, you know, last year with having to stay in, one of our solaces, we found, I think, Kelsey, we talked about this as a team, two things people got through last summer with was camping and growing things. And so then, of course, it was hard to find lids for canning. So we do anticipate that again this year as far as a big season for canning. So maybe stock up as you see it. And we always say stock up, then stop, because others need it too. So, all right, well, I've enjoyed this. What a great crowd, and you've done a great job gathering everybody, Kelsey. So this was sent to individuals, not just the Window Box Wellness folks. Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Community gardeners and master gardeners in
That's right.
between the counties received
That's
it.
right.
So, and I was just gonna ask Chandra, are you? I guess I don't think you have said anything, but do you have any later this year preservation classes or something you're gonna offer that, you know, especially with these folks, we could share
Okay.
or not on
Yeah.
the
Actually,
calendar.
Right. Thank you so much for asking. And I'm going to remind me to stop recording here, but I'll keep it on for this. So this summer, because it is difficult for people to gather still yet, we're kind of at that point where it's starting. I don't have anything planned. Next year, I really want to go big with this. So this year, I'm working with one of our specialists, Dr. Julie Garden Robinson. She's our dietitian lead on the food preservation side. She is working with a region of extension universities. And so what I would love to gather, and please call me or email me if you want to be on my list, of somebody who is in the field that is growing, so a gardener, and even if you're a larger scale, so kind of a producer, I would say, we are trying to and we will feed the information to these universities and then on to FDA in understanding food safety from the field standpoint and the grower standpoint of various, okay, how you water, because water can be a contaminant if it's, not from the right source, or how you maybe apply pesticides. So anyways, we're kind of going a higher system level. There's no classes for individuals unless you're a grower. That's where I'm at with food preservation this year. We do have a pretty big sun safety thing going on. So in other words, programming. I would say sun safety is very relevant for growers. And so we do have a presentation on the 4th at 10 o'clock at Bismarck Senior Center. And I definitely encourage you to go. We would have you call and sign up before, because that's how the Bismarck Senior Center is taking participants right now. So it's more on that side. I would do an individual thing for you if you wanted to, though. So, let's say that you have a group of friends that are all gardeners and you want to do a canning class. I would come in and do it for you special. We just have to meld our schedules. Okay.
That sounds good, Chandra. Is there any last questions out there for anybody? If not, I just thank you guys for joining us this morning. Chandra,